agenda item, we always call our board members and public members first, and then I open it up to the floor to get feedback and input. But the first discussion is with the board members, and then when we call the question, if there is a resolution, discussion on the resolution is only limited to the board members. So, I'm happy to have everybody join in, but I will recognize you in time. I think we're ready to begin. The first agenda is this community center at Stuyvesant High School. Now, as many of you have read, this community center has been in existence for probably 20 years. And we learned last month, or our last meeting, that the BatteryPark.TV Authority had decided to cease operations as of the end of December. And we have some concerns about that and want to look at this whole issue. And in that process, Paul Goldstein, who was a former district manager for Community Board 1, and now in Speaker Silver's office, was one of the real spearhead or driving forces behind the development and the opening of that. So I've asked Paul to join us and maybe give us a little background about the genesis of the community center and kind of its status. So Paul, you could...
Okay. Let me just stand somewhere.
Stand
where
I
can
sit.
well,
There's the hand over there.
sit?
Yeah,
Okay.
get comfortable.
Good evening. Thank you, Anthony. As he said, Paul Goldstein. So what I want to do is, first of all, take you back and give you some background on how this all came to be, and then talk about a little bit about where we are and where certainly Speaker Silver and I think some of the others in this room think we should be going with this program. So this saga began in 1987. In 1987, I was actually district manager. I don't know if anyone around here was around at that time. Bob, when did you accept?
I don't remember. I think I worked for you.
Bob, worked for the community board at the time, and Tom, you were around? Oh, okay. So anyway, back in those days, the action came before the community board that basically called for the mapping of the whole north neighborhood. There was no north neighborhood. So this was an action to map the streets, to map the park, and we actually accomplished a lot during that time. We got several of the new recreation spaces, many of which are serving you today, including several active recreation spaces, which this community basically had none of. So the community board played a key pivotal role in negotiating with the authority, along with the elected officials, to try to make sure that in return for this, the approval of this land use action, there would be some givebacks, some critical givebacks to the community. Now, in addition to those parks and streets, probably the biggest item was the movement of Stuyvesant High School to Battery Park City. So in 1987, they came to the community board and said, we want to put the high school here. Community board, and again, the electeds and others came together and said, okay, if you want to do this, we want a few things in return. Uppermost was community access to the facility. In those days, as Anthony's resolution states accurately, there was very little in the way of community facilities down here. There was virtually nothing. There were a couple of schools, I think 234 was just being completed in those days. So anyway, we asked for several things. One was access to 2 gyms, access to the swimming pool, and the locker rooms, and the auditorium.
And wait.
And weight room. And this was done during specific hours, and this was all agreed to in the final agreement, this Board of Estimate agreement. Members of the committee I know have copies of it. So the agreement basically says that this facility needs to be available to our community between the hours of 7 and 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, and on weekends, 8 hours per day. So this was obviously a major give back, but there was even more to it than that. The Board of Estimate resolution called for BatteryPark City to establish staff, which they didn't have at the time, to assist in the programming and supervision of Stuyvesant's indoor recreation facilities to ensure adequate use by the community. The agreement further states that the Board of Education has agreed that no building fees shall be charged for use of these facilities. That was a major concession too. Anyone who's at all familiar with using or renting space in schools, there are enormous fees that you have to pay to use the school. What is it, $40, $50 an hour?
Oh, it's much more.
Okay, it's hundreds of dollars, and, you know,
The high school is very expensive.
people just cannot afford these fees, so we managed to get those fees waived. And the agreement also mandates that time be set aside for youth organizations who will be charged, quote, the lowest fees practical. And it finally states that the fees charged are, if the fees charged are insufficient to pay the entire cost of security and supervision services, and there is sufficient demand for the use of facilities, the Battery Park City Authority will provide funds or take other measures to secure the availability of the facilities for the community. Okay, so 1987 comes and goes. We got this great agreement passed, and it's a milestone agreement. Unfortunately, even after that, it took quite a bit of heavy lifting to get this agreement finally into place, because the Board of Ed basically balked, and they said, we don't care what the agreement says, our students take precedence, and it's our school, we'll have it when we're not using it, and that's it. We don't care what the agreement says. Assemblyman Silver, who was in office at the time, I know Deborah Glick was involved, she was in office at the time, and the elected officials worked with the community board, with the mayor's office. We got the speaker, I went through his notes from way back when, and he pulled together meetings with the chancellor to try to get this thing off the ground. But believe it or not, the only thing that finally ended up succeeding in getting this program open was a lawsuit brought by the Battery Park City Authority. And they sued the Department of Education, and only then did the Department of Ed agree, and a judge ruled that we have an agreement here that they must comply with to give community use of the facility. So that brings us to 1993, when the program was opened. It's been open and operating since then. It's been, you know, very successful, I think. I know in recent years, and I know the authority has used this as one of the reasons why they think it perhaps should be closed, is that the attendance has dropped off in recent years. And I think that may be true. However, I recently learned, and I have a feeling this is probably a key contributor to the drop-off. I mean, there are other reasons. There are other community centers like this one, and one Bob opened, that have grown and open to serve the community. However, the community has grown by leaps and bounds. The demand has not ceased. Look at the schools, we keep building and building, and we keep feeding new ones. Anyway, but one of the reasons I think that this program has lost membership is that I understand the swimming pool has been out of commission for the last year and a half. Now, I don't know why that happened. I only learned of this like when we started working on this project about 2 weeks ago. So, considering what kind of program it is, many of the members signed up for the swimming pool. But there are 2 gyms in operation and other programs going. And one other key thing that you should remember about this program that sets it apart a bit is that it's much lower cost than some of the other options in the neighborhood. This is an affordable program, and it was meant to be that way. So let me just skip forward to where we are today. We have this agreement, but yet we have Battery Park City saying they want to close the program. I'm sure you'll hear from the other offices of the elected officials, but they've been fairly outspoken in saying they don't think this should happen. I think the community board is thinking about saying the exact same thing tonight. And we actually had 4 different attorneys on the assembly staff take a look at this agreement, just to see, are we misreading this? Do they have an out clause somewhere? And the answer is no, according to our attorneys. This is an ironclad agreement that does not have a shutdown date or an opportunity under certain conditions for them to walk away. At least that's the way we see it. Furthermore, when this this happened, I also took the opportunity to just to gauge what kind of demand there might be if, say, the existing program couldn't continue in exactly the same way, shape, or form. So I reached out to people like the Little League, Soccer League, I saw was here, and I know the Delta Giants, and I know Bus Townley's program. So I reached out to several of the major youth-serving organizations in the neighborhood, and I just asked them very simply, if space were available to you to operate programs at Stuyvesant High School, would you be interested? And I further asked them, would you be able to assume some of the costs of operating those programs? And the answer was very quickly and clearly yes. So that also, I think, is some sort of response to the argument that demand for the space doesn't exist anymore and there's no more reason to run it. So I don't have the solution to hand to you today, but what I can say is I think the opportunities are there to bring different groups around the table to try to keep this going. Obviously, maybe the simplest thing would be to just convince BatteryPark City to keep it in place as is, because I know that, perhaps the hardest part to replicate and find an operator for might be the swimming component. So, and we also had some preliminary discussions with BatteryPark City Authority about assuming at least certain expenses, like security expenses, like scheduling of the facility.
I couldn't see it. No worries.
I can tell you that just today the speaker had extensive conversations with Chairman Dennis Neal of the BatteryPark City Authority about this topic. And the speaker made very clear that he wants this facility that he worked very hard on for this community to continue to operate in some way, shape, or form. So that's pretty much where we are. I just think we really don't want to lose this program. We fought very hard, we worked very hard, and we continue to have more and more demand here. I think the demand exists today clearly. I think just the number of people who showed up, and I don't think there was a major effort to fill the room, but I think that's where we are, and certainly as far as speaking for something Silver, we would love to work with the authority on a solution to keep this program or some variety of it going to serve the neighborhood.
So we know what Speaker Silver's position is. I think Lume is here and Councilmember Chin. I'll get to you in a second. Councilmember Chin has also sent over a letter supporting the continuation of this, so we have that available.
Sarah
Yes,
from
Sarah.
Deborah Glick's office.
Yes, Sarah.
And we have also sent a letter clearly stating our position that the center should either continue operation or something comparable needs to be put in place. From our perspective, the authority is not able to unilaterally abrogate the Board of Estimate.
Okay.